Good morning. It's Market Day Report. We're just minutes away from opening the trade. But how about what happened in the overnight session? We'll start with the corn market in Chicago and higher trade. The December up 2 3/4, 567 for soybeans, and that's after yesterday's close, where new crop corn moved higher, but old crop settled in the red. Kind of the same story for soybeans, except nothing. New crop was higher yesterday and the old crop was lower. And in the overnight session, one tick higher, 1030 on the November. Soy meal was lower yesterday, trying to rebound in the overnight session. And soy oil higher yesterday and higher in the overnight session as well. All three wheat exchanges settled yesterday in the red and trying to rebound a bit in the overnight. 562.5, up 6.5 for Chicago. For Kansas City, it was 5 cents higher, 573.5. And then Minneapolis, 5 3/4 higher, 651.25. Cotton market, old crop has lost 3 consecutive sessions. And in the overnight session, lower as well, with D's at 67.33, down 27. All right, let's go to Springfield, Missouri. Brian Hoops, President, Midwest Market Solutions. We only have 2 more trading sessions left before we head into a long weekend. What are you watching?
Yeah, you're right about that, Tony. Good morning. Yeah, just today, tomorrow, and then we're closed until Sunday night. No trade for the grain and livestock markets Thursday night or all day Friday. Now, there will be equity markets like the stock market and S&P futures, crude oil, metals, US dollar. They will all trade on Friday. So speaking of the dollar, that's one thing that's given us some strength in these grains overnight. December corn posted new highs for the week overnight, despite really good planting conditions and a pretty fast planting pace. The dollar is weakening overnight. That's giving some buying interest to a host of commodities. The metals markets are moving higher as well. Plus, you're talking about, or at least we heard rumors anyway, that China is open to talk with President Trump and the White House given certain conditions. So they're trying to open the door to start some negotiations. There's a lot of countries that are negotiating right now, and we've heard that the ones that make an agreement the quickest will be given the most favorable terms. And now it looks like China is willing to at least come to the table and start negotiations and start talking. So good news all around. For as far as the grain markets go, reaching agreement, I think that's really positive. So we're seeing a decent bounce here in the grains. A lot of it is tied to the US dollar and what's coming out as far as news. It is a little bit drier as far as the forecast goes for safrinha corn areas in Brazil. Of course, they need some rain. They need to dry out in Argentina a little bit to speed their harvest along. But in northern Brazil, they do need some additional rain showers.
All right, Brian, let's take a break. When we come back in a moment, we'll look at livestock futures. Is the dollar affecting that, or are there other things? We'll find out. Market Day Report continues in a moment. We'll get a cattle on feed report. That's set to come out tomorrow afternoon after the close, and then 3 days before we get to trade it. Now, normally we'll get a cattle on feed report on a Friday and then have to wait till Monday. We just throw another day in there. So what else will the cattle market be trading, since we can't really trade that? I mean, we can trade expectations for it. Well, maybe cash cattle. Asking prices $210 in the South. Don't know whether or not the Packers will go for that. We'll watch cash cattle develop today and tomorrow. Live cattle futures yesterday. This is how we settled the session. Live cattle futures up 3 consecutive sessions now and higher across the board yesterday. 5 of the last 6 sessions, we've seen feeder cattle in positive territory, and again, higher across the board yesterday. And then the hog market has seen gains 5 consecutive sessions, trying to go for 6 today. Brian Hoops, President, Midwest Market Solutions. All right, those are some other things that we might be trading there. What else are you watching?
Yeah, so one thing I think you really have to watch this morning, we've been up, like you said, 3 days in the cattle market. We're pretty much par with last week's cash trade, and that's kind of where we may start to see some cash trade develop, is right in that even money. But overnight stock market or equity markets gapped lower, have come back and filled their gap, but they are trading lower this morning. And again, news coming out of the White House that affects that market. White House banning NVIDIA from selling their H2O chips into China. That has that market down sharply this morning. That's weighing on the entire S&P futures. No doubt that'll pressure the cattle market early this morning as we're just looking for some fresh news to trade off of. So lower equity markets dragging the cattle to losses this morning, but we're still looking for cash trade to develop. It's a short and kill week, so you would expect that the kills will be smaller and that the cutout values will rebound. We haven't seen that yet, but that should start to translate into higher box beef at midday and the close. That'll help those packer margins out once again. And if we can trade steady, might be a little bit of a victory for the cattle market here until we at least get into the cattle on feed report that comes out Thursday afternoon, as you mentioned, not able to trade it until Monday.
All right, Brian, I'm bringing up gold here simply because we've had record highs in the cattle market and record highs in gold. What's driving it?
Well, one thing about the gold is, it's not only concerns about a safe haven flight to get maybe people getting out of equity markets, getting into gold, but it's also relative to the dollar. As the dollar continues to plunge, there's going to be buying interest in gold and to a lesser extent silver. So there's a lot of targets. 3,500 for that gold. That's another couple $100 higher than where we're currently trading.
All right, before I let you go, how about the energy markets? Crude oil, I believe yesterday in the red. RBOB was lower yesterday. Nat gas moving higher. Nat gas is taking it on the chin, down 20% this month. Any expectations heading into that long weekend?
Well, you see the crude oil is moving a little bit higher here. And again, that kind of goes back to that story about China wanting to open negotiations with the U.S. They're a huge buyer of U.S. crude oil. If we get an agreement, maybe that opens the door for more demand from that country and us supplying them with the crude oil. But again, that's a long ways off. We should have an EIA report this morning that'll give us storage numbers. And a lot of times we do try and trade higher, anticipating a little bit tighter stocks than what we've seen here in the last couple weeks.
All right, Brian Hoops, President, Midwest Market Solutions. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning. And speaking of tomorrow, we get two reports from USDA. In the morning, a weekly export sales report. And then tomorrow afternoon, Tammy, cattle on feed report.
Right.